We don't have any microphone from you.
No?
No. Yeah, probably should do that.
Turn the microphones on.
There we go.
All right, thank you to all the friends and family who came. I'm going to take you through today a little bit of the process of how the ad came to be and why the ad came to be, and take you kind of inside some of the stuff that wasn't publicly known at the time or that just never got seen because it was intermediate product, and talk a little bit about why it came out the way it did and what the aftermath was. And I'm joined today by some of my cohorts in crime. So who's missing? Pixel Kitties is missing. She's probably like actually having to open her table.
She probably had to open her table, probably.
Yeah, so she may be running up here frantically or just forgot, and that's okay. But we have Mackenzie Fields, Autobot Girl, who was our artist in residence now, along with Pixel Kitties. But she's done more stuff lately for us, so I like her better. And Tally Mark, or Amanda, who is was actually in the ad and can talk a little bit about what it's like to have crazy people show up and tell you to put things in beakers. And my son, Daniel, who's the vice president of the fund, is in the back, and he was our Boston production crew. So I want to talk a little bit first about how the idea came to be. So I'm like most people in that I didn't come into the show when it first started. I've always been a big fan of animation. I was a Powerpuff Girls. Actually, I wasn't a Powerpuff Girls fan, sorry, I was a Kim Possible fan, and was an Animaniacs fan and classic animation fan. Watched Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s, which some of you are old enough to remember, and some of you are too. Yeah, there's some old people who will get references in the audience here. But I actually kind of just didn't get involved in it early, like most people, because it was running on an obscure new network no one had ever heard of. But I also am a journalist by semi-professional hobby, and so I had been following what had been going on just because the buzz started to happen about this weird subgroup on the internet. So like most people, I think Netflix started to, or iTunes started to have it. So and the first episode was free, so I said, I'll give it a try. And as we all know, that's all it takes to end up in the gutter the next morning with the taste of pony on your breath and things like that. So I got fairly addicted, but then I started to wonder because I went to a few meetups, and there was nobody like me at the meetups, in the sense that most of them were college or younger people. And so I started to wonder about that. And when you're a journalist and you wonder about things, you don't do what most people do, which is to say, oh, who knows, and walk away. You say, oh, maybe there's a story in that. In this case, I ended up with two things. One of which is not actually a story, but was a project, was I started the herd census because I wanted to know if there were other people about there. So I asked 9,000 people and found, yes, there are people like me. There are 3 of them who are 50 or above. But the other thing I did is I said, this show is really different in the sense that the fans are interacting a lot more with the show staff than like, Murder, She Wrote, or even older fanish stuff like Buffy or Firefly or things like that, where the fans were just purely consumers, that there seemed to be this feedback loop going on. So I pitched my editor at the Christian Science Monitor the idea of doing a story on what's going on with this dynamic. So that ended up being this story that ran on the Christian Science Monitor in the early spring of 2012. And as part of this, obviously Ponies was a part of it. We got this great piece of art from one of the staff artists at the Monitor. But I got to interview the president of Mutant Enemy, which was Josh Whedon's production company back in the days of Buffy and Firefly and Angel, and I got to interview one of the writer-producers of Chuck, which was obviously very heavily fan-influenced in that it stayed around. And I got to interview Jason Thiessen, because one of the cool things about being a writer is you get to get access to people by writing stories about them. So what ended up happening at the end of this is I learned a lot. I did an interesting story about the dynamics of how the internet is changing fans relating to shows, but I also got contacts at the Hub, because I had to go through the Hub to get to Jason. Now, the other thing that was happening about this time, next slide, was that we started to get disturbing rumors. If everyone recalls, this is about the time that we heard that season 3 was going to be 13 episodes, and the dreaded phrase 65 and out started to appear. They were going to put together a 65 episode syndication package, and then they were going to call it a day. And for those of us who were starting to really like the show, the idea of the show just going away like that was kind of disturbing. So how do you keep a show on the air? Well, fans are really good at bitching about it after shows go off the air, right? Firefly being a great example, where a show goes off the air, they tear down the sets, all the actors go on to new stuff, and everyone gets really upset about it, but it's too late. So I had this idea about, is there something we can do before the show shuffles off this mortal coil to keep it on the air, to indicate to the people in charge that there was a really interested group out there that wanted it to be on the air. And also to say, thank you for doing a really nice job where you could have done this half-assed show, because those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, Snorks, Smurfs, remember that it's really easy to put out Drek and call it children's programming. The Snorks being the worst example of that. The Smurfs had their moments. So I came up with this idea. And the idea was, let's run an ad on the Hub to just say thank you and to encourage them to keep making the show. So if you can go to the next slide. It turns out it's really, really hard to run an ad as an individual. I started by calling the Hub's advertising branch in New York and saying, the guys who sell the advertising, and saying, hey, how much for an ad? It turns out that is a nonsensical question in the ad industry, because nobody buys an ad, or even 5 ads. Advertising agencies are contacted by advertisers, and they put together packages, and they contact and say, we want to buy, a 70 ad spot package over 30 weeks on Saturday mornings on your network, and they put together a quote and they give it back to them. So they're used to working with advertising agencies, and they're used to certain lingo and certain phrasing. When you call and say, hi, I'm this guy, and I'd like to buy an ad, they have no idea who you are or why, or that you're serious, and certainly you're not worth their time in terms of just, they don't have the time or effort to get in touch with you. So that was kind of a dead end, and then I said, hey, I know other people at the Hub through this ad or this article I'd done. So I got back in touch with this woman named Dupe, who, if you've ever seen press releases about Pony, she's frequently listed as the press contact or the press spokesman, and said, hey, do you know someone who can help me with this, or see if the Hub's even interested in doing? And she got me in touch with someone named Erin, who works in marketing. And Erin turned around, and if you could go to that side, thank you. By the way, the Hub has the absolute most awesomest email address signature ever. Right? I want that, with rainbow dash at the bottom. But they, for those of you who think, oh, the Hub wasn't interested, Hasbro wasn't interested, we were an embarrassment to them, they didn't want to do it, they pretty much jumped all over this thing. I mean, it's hard to read this thing, but the last line of this says, again, we think this is a great idea and we will be in touch with further information and next steps, thanks so much. And this has been the reaction all along. I got 4 months ago a Christmas present from the Vice President of Marketing of the Hub with a handwritten letter. So, these guys really did appreciate this. This was not something that we dragged them through in any sense of the word. So the big thing here was we needed a quote. right? And it took them about a month to put together a quote. And you'll notice most of the stuff is blacked out here. One of the things that I'll talk about in a second is when we actually went live with the campaign, pretty immediately people started saying, oh, these guys are a scam. Nobody could have possibly gotten in touch with the hub. They're gods or something like that. I mean, people have this idea. They're a company. You can like get a quote out of them if you work hard enough. It's not like, you know, you're praying at Mount Olympus and maybe the gods will deign to speak to you. But rightfully so, a lot of people were suspicious of, didn't know me from Adam or anything. The easiest thing would have been to put this up and say, hey, here's a quote. But actually, even the amount of the quote at the time they quote it is sensitive information because it's information that their competitors could use to come in above or below. So by de facto, it's now out in the air, and I could show it because it showed up in our IRS filings and things like that. But the amount of the quote and the numbers down here, which are things like how many viewers you're buying for that amount of money, is all very sensitive information. So I could not release this quote, but it did show up at the end of, I believe, March with this number, which didn't actually surprise me as much as you think. A lot of people were very surprised that the quote came in about $12,000. I knew from some research that you could buy 30 seconds on ESPN one time for $18,000. And you know, $18,000 is a lot more than $2,000, which was their single spot quote. But ESPN reaches a lot more people than the hub does. So when you look at the CPM, the cost per thousand, it's not out of the reasonable number. So my question was it going to be 5,000 for a single spot? Was it going to be 3,000? They came in the numbers. It was 2,000, 12,000. So I knew what to set the campaign at, and so we were ready to go live. So then we went live with, as I say, some constructive criticism that came in fairly immediately from certain sectors of the fandom. So we went live, I believe, on, I want to say April 1st. If you could put up the next one. So we were very lucky in that, you know, the way to raise a lot of money is to get EQD, and specifically Fee, to write a really nice write-up for you. And anybody who ever read how many of you donated to the original campaign? Okay, so how many of you read Fee's original write-up? Okay, go back and look at it sometime. She basically said, I know you're buying money for plushies and things, but come on, guys, this is what you want to be spending. Don't you want to say thanks to the hub? I mean, she did everything but like go to people's houses and hit them on the head and pull money out of their wallets. So this helped us a lot, and I have thanked her several times for writing a really nice thing, and she's actually on our board now. So what immediately happened, of course, was that some people did say, oh my God, scam, right? And in fact, this was because there had been some very visible fundraising scams that had attempted to occur in the last couple months before this. So some people did say, hey, this guy's gonna take the money, walk away to Acapulco. This was really silly from my point of view because I'm a professional software engineer, and you know, we don't make small amounts of money. So yeah, you know, 18 grand is nice pocket change, but you know, it's nothing compared. So yes, I'm gonna absolutely ruin my career and go on the lam for, you know, for what essentially I make in a couple of months. But you know, because again, the fandom is relative. Everything is seen through the lens of the fandom and its demographic, and because most fans are scrambling to pay their college bills, they, by nature, kind of see, you know, oh yeah, I could do a lot with 18 grand. That's an Xbox and a lot of stuff to run on it. So, or it's my orthodontia bills or something like that. So there was some suspicion, and it got really hard to get confirmation because the hub was in a funny position. We were just advertisers. I mean, from a legal position, all we were advertisers. And we weren't even real advertisers. We hadn't given them any money or anything. We had just inquired about advertising. So there was very little in the way of an official statement they could put out to anybody and say, yes, you know, all they were able to say at the end of the day was that we had contacted them for a quote. And in fact, they were, I think somebody at EQD was able to get in touch with them and get that confirmation. And also some people started to say, I know this guy and he's not a scammer. So that helped and it got us over the hump. So if you go to the next slide. The other thing that helped a lot is we got two very critical people on board very early. One was Pixel, who I'm going to beat up after this panel for not showing up. And she not only did the original artwork, if you recall the original campaign, there was a poster promised. But again, chicken and egg thing, it's hard to get a poster from somebody until you have a project, and it's hard to do a project until you have a poster. So we just had a nebulous, there will be a poster promise at the end of this, and I didn't even know, I was scrambling for an artist once it became obvious we were going to have a project. So that was one thing. The other thing is that I was wondering what we were going to do for the music, and I actually approached William Anderson and said, hey, would you be interested in doing the music? And the response I got back from him was, it would be a little bit awkward for me to write the music for an ad thanking myself. So, but he said, but I will do the production on the music. I will work with whoever you pick as the music person and do the polish and final stuff on it. And as you see when we get to that section, he did an awesome job, and I have some stories about the process of that are really cool. So if we could go to the next slide. The other thing that happened, can you click? Oh yeah. This is when you can actually see in the comments, just hold it here. You can actually see in the comments on the original ad when 4chan and Reddit noticed us. Because it went from the first 100 or so comments, which were, oh my God, this is great. Wow, we actually funded $2,000 in 37 minutes. You know, this is awesome. We're the best fandom ever, da 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 da. And then about comment 150, you get, for the love of God, please don't do this. Next, and then this whole theme of what will the parents think when they see us. That's right, because I think, again, people project their own image, and so anybody who was of the neck-bearded, Cheeto-eating, living with your parents in the basement said, they're going to see me and they will run in fear. But the one I actually hurt the most, and by the way, I read pretty much every comment that was made on this project in the early days. I had Google filters set up. I was, it was the opposite of vanity Googling, because it's kind of like how to feel really depressed in the morning Googling. But this one just absolutely tweaked the heck out of me, which is to say, nothing good can come of this. And these people just drove me nuts, because that statement is so negative. It is to say that there is no possible positive outcome that it can occur for me. And I think, I've said several times, the hubris of these people to believe that they could project into the far future and know that there is no good outcome that could happen just drove me nuts. But when in doubt, turn to Einstein. Right? This is my moment to talk to anybody who's doing a project or who thinks that they've got an idea and is starting to have people tell them it's bad, or starting to tell them they don't. The one that's even worse is, great idea, but you'll never make it work. If you had asked anybody 2 years ago, hey, can a group of fans put an advertisement on network TV? Pretty much anyone would have said, that can never happen. And, there are a lot of people who just, I won't say they get pleasure out of it, but because of their personality or because of their life experience, tend to spend a lot of time tearing ideas down, and you need to ignore those people. There is plenty of room for people who constructively criticize, and what ended up happening with all these comments was, what we told pretty much everybody was, hey, if you've got an issue with the ad, we have a forum set up, we're discussing the script, we're discussing the ideas, we're trying to figure out who we want to pick as a charity, come onto the board and talk to us. And the people who did, even some very negative people, helped. But if all you want to do is say why it can't work, ignore that person, because they are not being constructive, they're being destructive. All they're doing, nothing in this world has ever occurred because of people telling you why it won't work. Again, not to be Pollyanna about it. So as a result of that, I want to talk a little bit about why, in the face of all this criticism, I thought it was important to do the ad. The first is to say thank you. Okay. Now, a lot of people have said that, oh, we could have bought them lunch. In fact, there was a campaign at that time to buy all the DHX people breakfast, I think. First of all, these are all professional people who make real salaries, and it's great to buy them a donut or some scrambled eggs, but it's not how the industry recognizes thank yous. In this industry, if you've ever seen Variety around awards time, it's full of ads. Can you go back, please? It's full of ads like this, right? Saying, for your consideration, I'll let you know when to go to the next ones. For your consideration, Naya Rivera for Glee, right? People who work in the entertainment industry, the way you say thank you is you say it very publicly. You don't even say it on just this private little YouTube thing. You say it in a way that gets attention. And so I thought if we were going to say thank you in the way the industry says thank you, not in the way a bunch of fans say thank you. The second reason was people say, oh, it was only 12 grand. That's nothing. And we would, it was ads they would have sold anyway. The Hub was running a lot of what are called house ads at that time, which is essentially ads for themselves, which are filler ads when you don't have advertising. The Hub actually has a lot of trouble selling ad time because they're half owned by Hasbro, which means they can't run Kenner ads and they can't run Mattel ads. So they do have trouble. That's why you see GAC, right, is because that's what they can sell a lot of the time. At the time, this had just come out, right? They had lost $1.8 million, and that's just Hasbro's half of the pie. So yeah, 12 grand isn't going to fill 1.8, but it is going to help them. And it's more importantly, it's a financial contribution, which is important. So next. The third reason is if you don't own your brand, someone else will define your brand, right? Everybody recognize this screen cap? Who has seen this in the last couple of weeks? Okay, this is from, I think, one of the Midwest BronyCon things. Okay, Fiesta Equestria. Right after this, that guy falls off the stage with his laptop. As this guy is, I have no problem with what happened here. This is just a bunch of guys having fun. It was really bad for someone to put it up and ridicule it. But this is what happens if you don't define your brand, is someone is going to put up the most ridiculous piece of video they can find of people having fun and say, look, it's a bunch of guys dancing spastically. And I'm sorry, he was actually dancing pretty well, but enthusiastically. And they happen to fall off the stage right as it happened. So it just looks like a bunch of uncoordinated people who don't know what's going on. And I thought it was important for us to at least put a stake in the ground defining our brand. And that the brand being Bronies, of course, that we're not all these people who obsess over, brushing the hair of their ponies while they, again, live in the basement with Cheetos and the whole other thing, that there were other people out there. And not to say that those were the only people, but that it's a mistake to stereotype a group based on just what you think they are. And finally, I thought it was important to say, you don't have to grow up and stop liking this stuff. I started to say pretty early on in the project, and honestly, this was not what I was thinking when I started the project, but I realized it pretty early, is that it's if people are saying that 18-year-old kids watching ponies is bad because they shouldn't be, the message that gives kids is, when you're 14, you should start watching Justin Bieber and stop watching ponies. And I think it was important to be able to say, we have, soldiers and scientists and, parents watching the show of their kids, and it's okay, you don't have to give it up. That you can continue to enjoy, there's that great quote from C.S. Lewis about, when I was a child, I was afraid to admit of childish things. Now I'm an adult, I watch them freely, and that, one of the marks of childishness is being afraid to admit you like childish things. So I thought that was an important message to get out to the core demographic, that it's okay to keep liking this when you get to be adult, and to give them some role models to say, yeah, you can be, a guy whose job it is to kill people and still like ponies, or to potentially kill people for soldiers. All right, next slide. So we got our money pretty quick. You know, that was our end total there, was $16,500. This, by the way, was the better version of our Indiegogo page. We had to do Indiegogo because you can't do a Kickstarter for a charity and they consider this a charity. That's Pixel Kitty's art. The first thing was a really gross Generation B logo using the Generation B pony font. It looked awful, but she got us something better right away. If anyone's curious what a really successful viral Indiegogo campaign looks like, that's what it looks like. We funded funded $9,000 in 2 days, and you know then it kind of petered out, and we got a little bit at the end because we did a last-minute, last chance thing. By the way, this resulted in me spending. Daniel, how long was the ticker tape we got at the post office when we went to mail the mailing tubes? He's got a mic.
Yeah, I remember particularly that basically when we got there, after we had sent out all these things, didn't like the head postmaster basically said, "Never do this again."
Yeah, she basically said we were there for 2 hours at one window. We had a 30-foot register tape when we were done, and she said, "Never come back." Okay, so the other thing is I realized, oh my God, I have $16,000 of unreported income. And the IRS is going to like me a lot at the end of the year if I don't do anything about that. So that's when we incorporated as a nonprofit, and I transferred all the funds over. And when we got our board of directors, which included Pixel Kitties and Haybuck, who has since left because he overcommits himself like no one's business, and several other notables, and it's changed a little bit over time. This is also when our corporate counsel, Andrew Schwartz, came on board, who, even though he didn't like the ad, liked the idea of setting up a nonprofit. So, and he came around on the ad. But we really value him. So this is when the Brony Thank You Fund got born. Next slide. All right, so then we had to actually make the thing. So this was the original script. And this is a lot of the reasons, next please, why I got flack, especially that last line, and to learn vows to imagine the world we'd all like to live in. That does sound a little bit like we all live in some escapist fantasy world. So this was done overnight so I could get the Indiegogo campaign up. I probably should have put a little bit more thought on it because it, for the first week or so of the campaign, had become the public image of what we were going to do, and it didn't project the best image. Also, we were really in the face, in the front and the back of the ad about being bronies and joining the herd. And, you know, again, I should have put more thought into it. You know, this made it sound like it was kind of brony wank, where we wanted to you know, say how cool we were. But again, the reason you have friends and participants in criticism is so you can make things better. So very quickly, it turned into this, which no one can read because it's too small. But this is the actual first attempt at a shooting script. This was our final cut, in fact, on the shooting script, where we had changed it quite a bit. We have one mention of bronies in it. We cleaned it up a lot. We're essentially doing what we intended to do, which is say thank you. But then something happened after we got done with this script. Next, please. The other thing that happened about this time is we had decided we wanted to pick a charity because we wanted to involve a charity in it. That was one of the big, strong messages that the forums gave, was that we have to have a charitable purpose for this, for all this money we collected. So we picked Toys for Tots, and it took a while. And in fact, if you want to know that Hasbro and the Hub were in on this, Hasbro vouched to us, to Toys for Tots, and Greg Heaney, VP of Marketing for the Hub, called Toys for Tots to vouch for us, to say that we were the real deal. And so then Toys for Tots allowed us to. Now, let me tell you when to go to the next slide. Next slide. So the other thing that happened is I got this call, and Daniel has the date on the note on the slide here. I don't have it in front of me, but it was about midway through the Indiegogo campaign, where I got this call from Greg Heaney, again, VP of Marketing for the Hub, who I had never talked to before, saying, "Hi, would you be available tomorrow, Wednesday at 7:15 to take a call from Margaret Loesch, who is the president of the Hub?" And I thought, and I looked through my address book and said, yeah, I think I can take that. Now, for those of you who don't know who Margaret Loesch is, she was the executive producer of My Little Pony Friends. Next. She was the executive producer on Gem. Next. She was the executive producer on G.I. Joe. She was the executive producer on Transformers. She was the executive producer on Muppet Babies. She was the executive producer on the new Scooby-Doo Mysteries. She was the executive producer on Dungeons and Dragons. She was the executive producer on Super Friends. She was the executive producer on Pac-Man. She was the executive producer on The Smurfs. That's it. Don't go any farther. Okay, so if you grew up in the 80s, she owns your childhood. Yes, I was going to listen to Margaret, and they spent about the first half of this is the pattern, by the way, they've called me twice, and they start with half the conversation is how great your doing is and how much they appreciate it and all that, and oh, by the way. And the oh, by the way in this case was two things, if you could go to the next slide. The first thing is they asked us to, click once. Thank you. To change Hi, we're Bronies to Hi, we're fans of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic because they wanted the ad to be more inclusive of the whole fan base. And by the way, all these changes were publicly presented to the forum and they went for them. They thought they made the ad better, and I agree that makes it better. And the other thing is they said, more than just Lauren Faust created the show. And that's true. She was the creator in the sense that she was the story runner. But if you go ask the writers and folks, there were a lot of people, including her husband, including a lot of other people who were involved in the germinal process of ponies. So they said, could you change it to just the creators? And frankly, we all knew who the creators are. Anybody who would care enough to know who Lauren Faust is knows who the creators are. So we didn't have a problem with that. Anyway, we still mentioned Bronies. It's in the back there. Really, let me tell you when to go to the next slide. I don't know how you did that. You hit help. All right, over, down, up, click. I think you can just hit space. Thank you. Go back. Thank you. So we did put Bronies in at the end there. Because we weren't going to take Bronies out entirely from the ad. But we thought that this made the ad better, so we had no trouble with it. The other thing you'll notice we've added at the bottom is a mention for Toys for Tots, and it was originally just going to be a title card, but then we realized later you can't read that much information. So if you see the final ad, it's a combination of the title card and a voiceover, which I'll talk about when we get to that. So now you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So why did we pick who we did? The big criticisms we got about the ad, as far as the spokesponies were, why was it so white? Why was it so female? Why was it so military? Why weren't there any neckbeards? And the answer is we had to take what we were given. We only got a total of, I believe, 6 video submissions for the ad, which shocked the heck out of me, because I thought we would get a lot more people. But in hindsight, I'm not as surprised as I was then. Next slide. The reality was that there were a lot of technical hurdles you had to go over. We wanted HD video, we wanted decent lighting, we wanted decent sound. We were going to Google the heck out of you, and we were going to run a background check on you, and we were going to make sure that you had never done anything evil in your life, because that's what you got to do when you're publicly putting people out as models of a group. And in fact, there's one person who, for nothing bad they did, but just something that I think would have failed the parent of a 6-year-old test, we had to decline after the fact. So that was a filtering process. And then there was a lot of negative publicity from the Reddit and 4chan and just in general all this churn about, oh my God, it's going to be awful, and everyone involved with it is going to be a laughing stock. So I think all of those caused it to drive down the numbers. Also, remember the fandom is about 85% introvert, and you're asking introverts to put themselves on camera. Now, introvert doesn't necessarily mean shy, but it is going to drive the numbers down. So, next slide. We also did, of those, we had to reject about half because They had crappy audio. We had one guy who was great. He was in front of a plane. He's a Civil Air Patrol guy. He's talking about it, and the wind is blowing like nobody's business, and he doesn't have a windshield on his mic, and it sounds like, we're here at Hurricane Dorothy. Got a couple of bad video. One guy who we would have loved to take, especially since he was not a Caucasian, it was him and his parent, just balked at the background check, and not again because I think they were, axe murderers. I think they just had privacy concern because we're asking for social security numbers and such, and from the kids. And one guy who just submitted just clearly was like, he was being the neckbeard guy, but he was doing it like, hi, I'm a fan of my, I just weren't going to take it. So who were we left with afterward? Mariana, who was the Canterlot Garden who gave us the $500 you get to pick who goes on it person, and I wouldn't have picked anybody else had to be given choice. He was just awesome for everyone who saw the ad. Next, we had Sean down in Texas, and we had Jeremy in Okinawa, right? So it could have been worse. We were 2 out of 3 soldiers when we had our first cut. So we had 6 speaking parts, and we only had 3 parts, so we were in trouble. About mid-May, I started to panic because we only had half the people we needed, and we were going for what we thought was a late September air date. Because those of you who think the hub tells us anything special, we had no idea when it was going to air either, and we were the advertiser. Next slide. All right, so we figured out we had to go shoot ourselves. We had to find people local in our area, which is Boston, and we had to find them quickly. Oh, the other request we'd gotten from Margaret Loesch was, can you put someone from the core demographic in the ad? Can you put a kid in the ad? And we had already planned to do it, so we said sure, but now we didn't have a kid. So we started casting our nets in the Boston area. We had already been contacted by one group of people. If you go on the next slide. We had to go and shoot it ourselves. And I don't have professional video production equipment personally in my things, but it turns out that an iPhone 5 shoots really good HD if you give it enough light. I had a decent mic, and with a little duct tape and a broom and a gooseneck mic, you can make a boom mic that works really well. And that had an XLR to mini adapter so it could go into the iPhone, and I had a decent tripod and a tripod mod for an iPhone. So we were able to go, we weren't going to be doing any dolly shots or anything like that, so we were able to go locally. And the 3 groups we dealt with locally were Nick and his mother, who are the father, or the mother's son pair you see in the ad, and Tally here, who I can now actually have someone else speak for a second. Tell us about filming day at Wellesley.
So I wasn't really out to my boss about being in My Little Pony, so we did, he knew I was a tremendous nerd. I think I'd worn the Doctor Who shirt, because, he was like a snarky British man, and he was a Doctor Who fan, but I didn't necessarily want to be like, I'm bringing my Little Pony friends over to work and whatnot. So we did it on a weekend, and I worked just in a small lab. It had been so funny, we'd started talking about this at a New York meetup where he was like, wait, you're a scientist? And I'm like, yeah, I work in a research lab. And he's like, why haven't you submitted to the ad? I'm like, I don't have a camera. He's like, I have a camera. When can I come over? And so I got on my lab coat and everything. I work in a muscle physiology lab, so we didn't have a lot of good showy stuff that would be okay to show kids on TV. I was like, I have a freezer full of dead things. I have all these leeches. I have a muscle lever. It's really cool, but it doesn't look really cool. And so we were just okay, we wanted to make it clear, this is a research lab, and we got out the hot plate, the spinner, and a beaker, and you couldn't see it very well. So I took in the expiration bin of stuff to dispose of, because everything expires, whether it's good or bad. Sterile saline expires, and it's salt water. I had some blue colored acid that's used for just calibrating pH meters, and I was like, put this in here. So the spinning blue beaker, and it was a lot of fun. But it was just sort of I'm at my workplace filming a My Little Pony commercial. This feels strange. This is
Right.
very strange.
It was really, it was at Wellesley College, and the place was totally deserted on a Saturday,
Yeah.
and it was like, you know, there were literally leeches floating around in a tank in there. It was,
Yeah.
we were in a leech lab. But so the other people we shot when Nick and her mom, and then we needed a 6-year-old. And you can't just kind of put an ad out, wanted, or drive around with a white van which says, you know, free ponies to get a 6-year-old. So it turned out that a friend of mine who I had gotten into doing pony plushies had a friend. So this was literally the friend of a friend who had a 6-year-old daughter who watched the show, and we went over on I think a Saturday. And this was anyone's ever, you know when they say don't work with animals and children? She was the most terminally shy 6-year-old girl when we started that you ever have seen. She was like, you know, you want to be in a commercial, dear, don't you? Hiding behind the mother. And then she said, well, you can wear your pretty party princess dress or whatever, or your pretty dress. And she, can I wear it tomorrow too? Yeah, okay. And then we got, if you've seen the outtakes, you can see she was a lot of fun to work with. You know, she was 6 years old, so getting her to remember honesty and generosity and loyalty and things. We went with fudge after a while for one of them because we knew what word we wanted her to say, and it was the word before that one. So we just needed her to get the rhythm right. And so we finally had all of our people in the can. Next. The problem was that some of the audio that had come in was a little rough. It wasn't bad, but it was tinny or had been shot in a room, so you got this effect. Some of the video wasn't the best in the world, so we were going to need some post-production magic. And we got that from 2 people. We got that from a gentleman by the name of Dan, who contacted me locally. He lived in Derry, the area we're in. And next one, please. And we spent I'll tell you how to play that in a second. We spent a day at the Derry Public Library in a closed carrel with a copy of After Effects on my laptop, and this guy was a freaking miracle runner. So I'm going to show you, this is the version of the ad we had at the time. It's got scratched music because the music hadn't come in yet. So you'll hear what my kind of, oh my God, if I don't get any good music, this is the piece of music I bought for $5 music. And what you're going to see is before and afters of before and after After Effect. And some of them are subtle, but some of them just really pop out. So you should see a play button really small there.
We're fans of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and we'd like to say thanks.
Thank you to Hasbro and the Hub for creating such a fantastic show.
Thanks to DHX Media and all the animators for making it so beautiful to watch.
To the voice actors and singers for bringing the characters to life.
To the composers for making such wonderful music.
And to the creators of the show and the writers for bringing a little more honesty,
Loyalty,
Laughter,
Generosity,
Kindness,
And magic into the world, for kids and bronies alike.
Show your appreciation for the show by donating toys this holiday season.
Okay, some of those are subtle, but I want to show 2 in specific, so if you can get to the next slide. Okay, this is Sean. Sean is totally lost in the background in this image because everything is in pretty much the same focus plane because it was shot from pretty far away. He's also kind of washed out. So what Dan did is he blurred the background around him. He also, by the way, steadied it because the camera was moving. So he did motion tracking and steadied it down so that it looked like it was a fixed point camera. But the one that I'm most proud of that he worked on, if you go to the next one, other than that end plate he did for Toys for Tots, which was amazing. So what Jeremy gave us was totally blown out in the back. He was in shadow, and it was literally just white. There was no detail there. So Dan said, get me a color, get me a cloud plate. Get me just a photo of clouds. So I bought a photo of clouds off the net, and if you can click, and he dropped in the background there, a cloud plate. So everything has basically been rotoscoped out and replaced with clouds. He also brought out the detail of his face. So that cloud view there does not exist anywhere but on a photo somewhere. And if Jeremy ever saw this, like, it wasn't like that day. And this is why you should never trust anything you see on video. So next. So the other thing that happened is William Anderson took, if you listen to the long YouTube version of the ad, you can hear some of the other submissions I got. I had one very knowledgeable fan who's in the industry tell me, oh God, only send him like your top 2 or 3 choices for songs. He's gonna be too busy. And Anderson said, send me everything. So I sent him 23 submissions, most of which were really good, and he picked what he thought the best one was, and then he worked with Arturo Fonseca, who was our winner, to do this. So if you click on the left speaker, you can hear, click on the play. This is what got submitted. This is what it was like after he did the post on it. And it's the same song. He just made it better. All right, but the other thing he did for us is our audio was still pretty rough. As you can kind of hear in that rough cut of the ad, he went and he re-EQ'd and did some filtering on the entire, he did the final mastered audio track for the ad for us. So he is best pony of many in my book. Next slide. Okay, so we still had some work to do. We had to get a letter from Toys for Tots saying, yes, honest to God, you can use our name in the ad. We had to get letters from all the soldiers saying we hadn't filmed it on military property. We had to get approval from Hub Standards and Practices. We had to get approval from Hasbro because we were using their trademark names. So if anybody thinks that Hasbro wasn't in this up to their gills, Hasbro was in this up to their gills. Next. So then we were ready to air, except we didn't know when it was going to air. We finally got sick enough of waiting that we showed it at Canterlot Gardens, just because it was the con after it was done, but closest to when we thought the real air date is. But literally, we didn't know until about a week. You know, we literally found out when everyone found out when season premiere was going to be, because we were backed up the week before season premiere up until the episode of Pound Puppies right before season premiere. We couldn't show it in Ponies because of FTC regs about advertising in the same show. So if you go to the next slide, this is what actually aired on, Daniel, you got to read the bottom of the slide for me. Right, so Monday at 9 o'clock, the week before Ponies. Like it or not, for those who were critics of it, we made history. We were the first people ever to air a fan ad on a national broadcast network. And for those of you who don't remember, it looked like this.
We're fans of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and we'd like to say thanks.
Thank you to Hasbro and the Hub for creating such a fantastic show.
Thanks to DHX Media and all the animators for making it so beautiful to watch.
To the voice actors and singers for bringing the characters to life.
To the composers for making such wonderful music.
And to the creators of the show and the writers for bringing a little more honesty,
Loyalty,
Laughter,
Generosity,
Kindness, and magic into the world, for kids and bronies alike.
Show your appreciation for the show by donating toys this holiday season.
And I will publicly say what a lot of you know, and I know there's some controversy about this person, but I did not know at the time, but I'm still glad we use him. That's Naked Mole Rat doing Derpy's voice at the end of the ad, who was at the time the fan voice of Derpy. So we just thought it was good to get Derpy in the ad somehow. So let's talk about the aftermath. Part of the reason this didn't get as much publicity as it might have, next slide, is that it was election week. And oddly enough, the news media had bigger fish to fry than a pony ad that week. But we did get some, first of all, we got, if you go look, we turned the YouTube comments off because YouTube is the open sewer of the internet as far as comments go, and I got tired of seeing the word faggot. But, we got 1,300 plus to 250 odd minus, and to put it in perspective, if you go to the next slide, Justin Bieber is 3-1 against. So I think we did better than Justin Bieber, so I'm happy about that. We don't get as many page views as him, unfortunately. Next. We got coverage in Wired, and they actually did a very good ad about kind of how the sensibilities of the viewing public are changing, using us as an example. Next. We got coverage in some tech media. Next. And we got coverage in actually the advertising industry. This is the advertising industry journal, and I loved one of the quotes in this. If you can click, Daniel. Right, and I'll just read this quickly. Where the commercial lacks polish and makes up for it in heart, the Bronies, although often ridiculed for their subculture, show the power of a connected, dedicated fan base. If only all fan groups were motivated to thank a brand for its impact on their lives, as well as be inspired to donate to charity on the brand's behalf. Right, so people seem to like the idea. And in fact, everything I've ever seen said that it was great to read the comments, because even the people who were really butthurt about the ad said, it didn't come out as bad as I thought it would, which I think, right, next. All right, so I just want to go back to this, because this, remember, was the thing that would tweet me the most. So let's talk about the good that didn't happen from here. Next. Right, Dan Gibson, the guy who did the editing, was actually able to get professional work. He had been working as a grocery bagger. The guy who did all that After Effects work for me because he couldn't get professional work. He's now doing professional video production work, partially as a result of having that ad in his portfolio. Next. Right, Arturo Fonseca, who is was at the time a music student down in Texas, got to work with William Anderson and work on again, a commercial that aired on TV. Next. Toys for Tots got $7,000, and they got the benefit of that ad. Next. And the fund was born. We've raised over $72,000. It's going to be more after this. We're about to endow a scholarship for animation. So I think we had just a little bit of good that came out of it. I want to mention one other piece of good, which is, this is your turn, Mackenzie. Tell about how getting to work with the fund has affected you.
Well, I'm 18, just out of high school, about to go to college, and at my age, I now have a published piece of artwork. I've designed the mascot for the fund, and I get to speak here at BronyCon. People are asking me for autographs, people are taking pictures with me, and it's kind of overwhelming in a really, really awesome way. And it wouldn't have happened if My Little Pony hadn't come along.
All right, so with that, if you can go next slide. We've got, I think, like a minute or two, so if there's any questions. Yes, sir.
All right, I remember I was one of those guys who said, I didn't say nothing good can come out of this,
Yeah.
but I was like, it feels kind of pointless.
Yeah.
So I would just like to say, this was, we were wrong.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, the only thing that the only nothing good could come out of this were the YouTube comments, with the homophobic YouTube comments once the full ad was shown on YouTube. Was that true?
Yeah, but you know something, if you go look at SciShow or something else that's just really innocuous, they did an episode about lizards, and they'll get, oh, well, you're oh, well, you know. YouTube, there's no, I think you could put pictures of puppies frolicking on YouTube and you'll get bad comments. It's just the nature of the beast. All right, well, in that case, thank you guys very much for coming.
We had a good crowd.